Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Shivani Vashish, Professor of English at Manav Rachna International Institute of Research and Studies. And today I'm going to make a presentation on how to write a PhD thesis and what are the ethics that should be kept in mind and that are associated with it. So before I start my presentation, I would in fact compliment Dr. Ramachandran, who has come out with this novel idea of having the online sessions on a very pertinent and relevant topic related with research. At this time, when the whole nation is under lockdown, we have nothing else but to upgrade our skills. And what better way than to interact with each other and to interact and to come on a common platform through these online sessions. During the course of my presentation in next 45 minutes, I would be giving a lot of examples pertaining to the field of social sciences. And before I start, there's a very important point that usually people discuss. And they say that what is the benefit of taking up research and why one must enroll in a PhD program and do a doctorate degree. So, as we all are colleagues and we belong to a teaching fraternity, so the very answer that comes to our mind that this profession, besides being very respectful, besides being very prestigious, we are also regarded as intellectuals. And earning a PhD degree definitely adds on to our experience, adds on to our knowledge, and it also helps most of us in getting a good job offer and being placed well. Besides that, we also belong to a category of people who are socially awakened and they do understand what social responsibilities later on in their life, then they can take up and contribute to the development of the society, which becomes a very important part of research because research can never happen in isolation. It cannot happen without any motive. And what better motive than coming up with a solution, coming up with an answer which would be helpful, which would be of benefit to the whole humanity and to the society. So most of us would definitely be having a doctorate degree by now, and a lot of us of you would be definitely guiding their research scholars also. So most of the students, when they come for admission in a PhD program, that's the first thing that they ask their teachers and the supervisors. And so research is never halt. It is always evolving, and there are a lot of changes and development which are happening in this field. And with a lot of tools coming online, we all have to be upgraded with this also. So now I would begin with my presentation, and the title of my presentation is you look at these three important words which I have written in the first slide is search, research, and research. So as the words in itself give an indication that what research is. So the third word research is nothing but the addition of two syllables, that is search, and re has been added to it. That means research is nothing else but to again search which was already there from a new perspective, from a new dimension. So the search which was already going on, it has to be re-looked, it has to be revisited so that it becomes a research. Now I'll move to the second slide. I'll come to academic research. As I told you that we, most of us would be supervisors and we have our PhD students coming to us. And in fact, most of you would be definitely pursuing your own research also. So the research and the basic question that comes in the mind of a student is what topic should be taken up for their PhD? uh, PhD program, what should be the title of their thesis. So before you zero down, before you narrow down to a specific title, there has to be a conscientious effort which has to be taken in this direction. And your research topic or the theme should definitely arise from a critical scrutiny of the secondary material. Each word here is very important. You have to read before you come down to a specific title a lot of secondary material. And for that, I would suggest all the students to visit libraries and just not depend upon the online Google Books or online material which are available. Because if you happen to visit Google Books, you will find that a lot of pages are logged. You cannot read the whole text there. And I belong to an old school of thought wherein I would suggest and would recommend that one should make a visit to libraries, bookstores, and look for journals which have the papers containing material related with your specific topic. And then all that secondary material, once it is collected, it is collated, you have it ready with you, it has to be scrutinized. There has to be a deep thinking there. It has to be looked from a critical perspective with a critical eye. Now the research is taken up to fill a gap, to correct some error or misunderstanding. But whatever it is taken up with this intention, with this in mind, there has to be a firm basis for the chosen field. You should be very much sure of that what topic you have taken up, the theme you have picked up. After a critical scrutiny of the secondary material, it is relevant. It is a novel idea. It is something new that you are going to take up, and this is really going to help not only you in getting a good job or being well placed in your life, but definitely as I said in the beginning of my session, that it's definitely going to help humanity and society also. So there has to be a gap, there has to be some misconnection, there has to be a void which will be filled up, which will be overcome through the reports of your own research, through the answers to your own from your own research. But before you take up a theme, another important point you need to understand is it should be from the available resources, and it should be manageable. At times, we have seen that we get very enthusiastic scholars who are very ambitious, and they say, okay, we'll do this and that, and they very ambitiously they will pick up a topic, but it becomes, by the time they are halfway through, they are almost drained out of their energy, and they are totally baffled that how to proceed now. It is too much for them to handle. They have too much to be addressed in their research theme. So before a student becomes too ambitious, one needs to take in mind that it should be from the available resources. What texts are available to you? What secondary material is available there in support of your argument, in support of your theme, and whether it is manageable or not, or it becomes too much for you to handle. So therein, a limitation always has to be considered. As I told you in the beginning, that research is nothing but looking or searching something over again, very carefully doing a research is. So it is from a new perspective, from a fresh perspective, and mostly in humanities and social sciences, we find it is by applying a new theoretical framework with a little justification. So some of the theoretical frameworks I've written it, whether it is from a Marxian point of view, or you have taken up psychoanalytical research, or you are going to talk about the feminist readings of the novel and the trauma stories or the eco-critical perspective. So a fresh research or the text has to be read with a fresh perspective, keeping in mind the theoretical perspectives which you might be interested in taking up. Now, as I mentioned, that the secondary material which you collect in connection with your academic theme or the topic of your research has to be from a critical perspective. The second question which would come in your mind is what kind of secondary material should you refer to? So very important is that you should refer to those books which have notes, which have bibliography and index. And at the same time, they are well reviewed and cited. If there is a critical book which has never been circulated, which has not been reviewed and cited, um, um, cited. So then that means it is would not be very helpful to you in your research. So you need to, for the secondary material, refer to those critical books that have been cited the most. And also, as a student, one needs to keep in mind while you are reading these critical books, the secondary material is you need to have a habit of note taking. Now, note taking either on cards or on sheet of papers with all details should be taken then and there. Uh, a student can also have the note taking in his or her register or in a diary, but important, or you can in fact write it down in your own laptop also if you're very comfortable doing that. But more important point is that all the details have to be important phrases and paragraphs should be in fact written then and there. At times we see that students have read a book and kept it aside and gone through a lot of other books also in connection with the research. And then when they come to writing it down, the chapters are written and they want to refer back to, they remember a point which they had read in one of the books. Now they are totally clueless. They do not remember what they had read. They do not remember in which book they had read that point. So, and they start looking for it here and there, and a lot of time is wasted, and they are totally lost in this scenario. So, the point is that instead of wasting your energy, your time, which has to be towards writing your chapters and attending to your particular research, you should always develop a habit of note taking, writing down all the details of the book, which page number, what phrases, what paragraphs, write it in your own words. It could be rephrased later on when you're writing your chapters in a very impressive vocabulary using very good words, can be expressed again. But you do not want to waste your precious time in looking at and in finding those particular books again and again. A lot of students we find they go to Google, and in fact we find nowadays teachers also say, oh, you do not know the answer of this question, Google it up. So that's the very easy and practice which now even teachers and students do it, but it has to be used with a word of caution. Remember, Wikipedia is not reliable. In fact, if you look at Wikipedia, it is always written there that this can be changed and you should not, in fact, totally depend on it, and it is not 100% correct information. It is on the basis of the information that they get from here and there. So that cannot be quoted, and that is not a very reliable source. If you read something on Wikipedia, it has to be corroborated by reading the same information in other resources also. Second point is that always keep in mind your research problem. Look for views that support and contend your view from the secondary sources. Whatever research problem you have taken up, the gap which you want to fill up from by finding answer to that problem, you need to look for secondary sources which are in support of it. And secondary sources, remember, which are very reliable and which have been cited and reviewed the most. So that has to become the important basis of your research problem. Reading material, secondary material is for scholarship. However, you must always, I'll come back to that point again later on in my presentation, do not solely depend upon uh, the material from these secondary sources. The primary sources definitely are your own text. The primary sources is your text, but you look for that to find answer to your research problem. You look for support in reading material from secondary sources, but do not make secondary material as the only basis of your research theme. You need to have your own justification. You need to come out with your own analysis and just not rephrasing of the material which already exists in the secondary source. So now, why and how to use the secondary material, which I've already spoken of, is you want to strengthen your own point, which you have come across. You want to use secondary material to support it, and also you need it to elaborate of you need to elaborate on what point you have noticed, and you want to bring out a fresh perspective. But again, how to use the secondary material, this is very important, right? uh, is a proper acknowledgement of secondary material has to be done. If that is not done, then it would be totally a plagiarized thesis. You would have, if you do not acknowledge the efforts of the writer from where you have picked up that those few lines and quotes, then definitely you will be charged for plagiarism. You would be checked, you will be questioned, and your thesis would never be passed from the quality check of your institute and university. So therein you need to give acknowledgement, and which becomes a part of your bibliography and references at the end of your thesis, right? That proper acknowledgement has to be done. And there are certain ethics also involved in this, and whenever you are pursuing your research. That forms the second portion of my presentation. I'll come back to it a little later. So whatever you are quoting from secondary material, it has to be mentioned in quote marks with inverted commas, with details to be given later on. Right now, in social sciences, we are following MLA 7th edition, but we do find most of the universities have also started quoting as per the 8th edition. And maybe there would be certain differences as per your university, as per the institution you are pursuing your research from. Some may have APA style, some may further be following MLA style. So you need to refer to it. But whatever the scenario is, the lines which you have picked up, they have to be given in quote marks. Also, you can paraphrase the idea at times. It is not necessarily that you write the whole paragraph you have read. You have liked the point which the writer of the book has made it in that paragraph. And so instead of quoting the whole of the paragraph, you also has an option of paraphrasing it, mentioning it in your own words, but mentioning it very clearly and pointedly. Also, third point is you can summarize the material to bring out the main points of the passages. That we always learn in whenever we do the Precis writing, we are told how to make a summary of the long passage. But again, certain precautions also have to be kept in mind when you are working with secondary material, because that's become very important. Precautions it, you have to avoid quoting journal statements. Nothing has to be quoted out of your context. If it doesn't relate with your research theme, it doesn't relate with the topic which you are handling, then it is irrelevant in your thesis, in your work. So that makes no sense of it being quoted. It should fit into your argument, just not for the sake of making the or increasing the length of your thesis. You fit in certain quotes here and there. No, it has to flow into the, it has to be incorporated so that it takes up the flow of the argument. There has to be a cohesion in the thought process when you are writing your chapters. Long quotes should be used sparingly. not on a very regular feature, and should always be followed by your comments. That if there is a long quote, at times we find that people just mention the quotes there without any input, without their own comments, without their own analysis. That becomes very abrupt. That doesn't let a reviewer, whenever you have finished your writing of thesis, you have submitted your work, it definitely goes to an evaluator, two, three people, maybe within India or maybe abroad also. Some universities have the tradition of sending their thesis for evaluation outside India also. So therein it becomes very difficult for an evaluator to really understand the sense of fitting in the quote there. So always remember, if a quote is too long, there has to be a few lines, few comments from your side following it. Now this is the slide which I was talking of earlier, that your secondary material should not be just your research. It should not become that your dissertation, your research, whether you are working on an MA dissertation or you are working on a PhD thesis, it should not become a patchwork of quotation from different sources, a summary of sources and downloads from the web. So something picked up from here and there, and everything collated together, and that forms your work, your thesis work. No, your secondary material has to be very nicely fitted into your argument with your own comments, and it should never appear to an evaluator, to a person who is reading your work, that it is just a patchwork picked up from here and there. Another danger with which an evaluator and a supervisor always needs to keep in mind, and a research scholar also, that your text should not turn into a thematic summary and there is no analysis. A work in a social sciences field is not going to serve any purpose if it becomes just a summary. At times, we see that a few theses I've come across wherein a racial discrimination or a topic related with atrocities against women have been taken up, and that just becomes a summary of your primary sources or of the text which you have taken up. There is no particular analysis which an evaluator can read from your site, and then it becomes a very shoddy work. It doesn't give a good impression, and at times then you find that the thesis always comes for some revision and some improvement is suggested from the evaluator side, and that becomes again a too long a hassle for a scholar and also a supervisor to go through. To avoid it, please remember that you refer to a secondary source, you take up material by acknowledging it, but definitely your own point of view, your own analysis plays a major role in your own work. Now, a thesis, this is an important book which I would like to mention by Mark Schorer, wherein he talks about, the title of the book is Technique as Discovery. Now, he in his essay, he talks of technique as the only means that the writer has of discovering, exploring, developing his subject, of conveying its meaning, and finally of evaluating it. So he says that the theme should emerge after a proper treatment through a technique. So your technique should become a mode of discovery, a mode of exploring, a mode of developing your subject. It should not just become a thematic study. Your research should not be just a simple summary of your text, but it has to explore, it has to convey its meaning, and the technique has to be then employed perfectly to come out with the right kind of result. This tendency is most pronounced in dissertations that attempt comparison. For example, to compare X and Y as mystical or nature poets. A writer, A writes a chapter each on X and Y based largely on known materials and then a chapter on comparison. This is totally unacceptable. Lot of now we see a trend coming up wherein research scholars take up comparative analysis. So this example is basically for that. I gave you example of feminist study of certain texts or racial discrimination which have been taken up certain American writers or Afro-American writers, and you compare two writers. So now the dissertation should just not become in few chapters you have taken up writer one, and few you have taken the second writer, and in the last you just draw a simple comparison based on the material which already exists. Remember the first slide, I said research is nothing but a search from a new perspective. So your own analysis, your own perspective needs to be very much clear in your work. Now, how to quote secondary material in your chapters, in your dissertation work. If it is of 4 lines or less, the normal practice is that you weave them into the text with quote marks. You put inverted commas, and then in those inverted commas, you write 4 lines, and in case if it is less than 4 lines also. If it happens to be more than 5 and more than that also, you little bit indent the text, use set of mode, and there are no quotation marks. You could also begin the quote or words with the name of the author or critic. That is also a usual practice which is followed worldwide, that you can always in your sentence you can make a mention of the writer, you can always mention the book in which he has mentioned these lines, and then you can refer to the secondary source. So this is a usual practice which is followed, and one needs to keep in mind. Now, when you have collected your secondary material, you have critically analyzed it, you have thought about the research team that you need to take it up. I have also discussed about how to quote and how much to depend upon the secondary material. The next important point I want to bring across to all of you is certain journal tips related with thesis or dissertation writing. Now, the chapters have to be properly sequenced. A thought process has to go in the background before you decide on what chapters should be there, how many chapters one should keep in mind, just not for the sake of the length of your dissertation, it has to be increased or more than 5 or 6, but a real serious thought has to go into it. And these chapters have to be properly sequenced. Sequencing must be logical, well organized, and cumulative. It should flow from the beginning to the end. There has to be a logical sequence. There has to be an organization so that when you submit your work and it reaches the evaluator picks it up and reads from the beginning till the end, he can make sense out of it. And it doesn't become a very haphazard study wherein he's just flipping here and there and he finds and he is also lost, like you were lost in your research. The chapter should develop the main argument systematically. If required, each chapter may have sessions and subsessions with numbered or unnumbered headings. Now, that all depends, these specifications may vary from one institute to another, from one university to another. However, majorly, most of the universities in their list of contents do want research scholars to mention their chapters, and each chapter should have sections, subsections, and they have to be numbered, or it could be unnumbered also with headings. So that makes the flow of your idea and gives a very nice impression that how your thesis have progressed and in what manner you have taken up your research particular theme. Review of literature, which forms basis of almost all the dissertation work, it should not be very sketchy or overcritical. We find that the students, when they are attempting review of literature, they pick books here and there, and they just mention it in a numbered form without actually reading those books, without actually writing in their own words that what they have read in that particular book, what actually the review they have done in that portion. So one needs to be very, and that forms the basis before you reach to your research problem, before you take up a theme or a topic of your research. A lot of work has to go when you are dealing with review of literature. Unless until you have read the secondary books, the secondary material related with your broad area of research, you can definitely not reach to your specific problem, your specific research problem. So you have to put in little effort and continuously move in a systematic manner when you are dealing with review of literature. And then when you are writing it down, please attempt it very nicely, and it should appear that yes, you have done it in a very systematic manner. Your methodology should also be clearly outlined, whether it is a qualitative research or it happens to be a quantitative research, whatever it is. But a research methodology forms the important basis. Evaluator would definitely want to know that what methods you have used, what approach you have used before in dealing with your research problem. And that also becomes a major question when you have to face your final viva voce, that what was your approach or what methodology you have used in dealing with your research problem. So you should be thorough with this, and you till from the beginning till the end of your research, you should be aware of this point. uh, Also, when you are writing, the style of writing has to be kept in mind. It should communicate fluently, convincingly, and appealingly. This is the writing style that a writer needs to adopt. Also, we find that the students write very long sentences that not only breaks up their thought process, but it also leads to fogging. Fogging when the idea doesn't come across to the person who is reading it. Maybe an evaluator, could be your supervisor also. So your sentence should not be too long. Use simple sentences, subject, verb, object, sentence structure. It should not be more than, ideally more than 20 words. Break it down. Do not write this and then this and this. This is the usual practice that most of the students use and do it when they are writing their work. Please break it down into simple sentences, and that is acceptable, and that really looks nice because the idea comes across to the evaluator perfectly. Avoid use of jargons and heavy vocabulary. You have Do not make much use of fancy words. You like it doesn't mean that it would go well with your dissertation or your thesis work also. So be very careful of what words you use. Paragraph should not be either too long or too short. They should begin with a topic sentence, develop the topic in its main body, and then close with a wrap sentence. So the paragraph should begin with the topic sentence with whatever idea you want to develop in that paragraph. Begin from there, and then towards the end you need to close it also. Never start a sentence with a critic, for it conveys a wrong signal to the reader that you are dependent upon the support of others at time. But this is a very normal usual practice which is done by almost all these scholars, that they begin that Mr. So and so in his book has written this. It has to be, the critic has to be, or secondary material has to be quoted in support of your own argument, but never you have to give an impression that you are totally dependent upon that. You need to have come out with your own arguments. The language should be correct, concrete, and clear. The words should be appropriately used, and very much to note is they have to be accurately used. The words which you are using, if you are not aware about the meaning, the context in which you are using, please refer to dictionary and see that you are using it in a very appropriate manner. The tone has to be even. That means it has to be neither too subdued nor too stringent. You do not have to be very direct in this. Neither you have to please anybody. You have to just state your argument in very clear, simple words. Avoid converting abstractions into a thing to give human capacities to non-human things, right? So either otherwise it would be referred as reification. For example, grab my future or see your fate, etc. So do not make non-human things, non-living things as human or give them human capacity. So avoid going into abstract ideas and write in a very simple tone which is accepted, which is understood by the reader. So when you are writing, you need to avoid acronyms and abbreviations. For example, if the name of the text is The God of Small Things, so write the full name of the novel instead of just referring it to in an acronym manner TGST. I've given example of quoted also, QTD. This stands for quoted, or captain, CAPT. So these abbreviations should be avoided. And in a thesis, spend some time and write the full words. You would have already given 3 to 4 years. The research usually takes around 5 years, 6 years, and more than that. So you have given your time and energy for writing your particular research. Just avoid these mistakes, and that would help you in finishing your work in time, and would also leave a good impression regarding your work also. Oversighting, over referencing, that I've already said, should be avoided. Use present tense whenever you are writing. Historic present tense should be used. First reference in the text to an author or a critic should be complete. Subsequent references should be shortened. So the first one you can make a complete detail about it. However, when you are referring to the same text or an author again and again, you can have a little short reference to it. And now, if you have finished writing all your chapters, you have attempted, the first draft is ready with you, then what are you supposed to do? Then you have to leave it for some time. Leave it untouched for some time. Do not read it, because it happens most of the time that we are not able to come across mistakes because we have been reading those same material, same pages again and again, and our eyes get totally fogged, and we cannot identify, we cannot pinpoint the mistakes and the errors that we have done it unintentionally. So leave your first draft for some time, and then once your mind is free, you are relaxed after a few days, maybe a fortnight, pick up your first draft, again read it, and now don't read it as if you have written it, but read it from the reader's point of view. And reader's point of view has to be very analytical. Read it from that perspective and see what points you have missed out, where you have not provided enough detail, where it becomes superfluous, where it is too much of quoting of secondary material, what vocabulary is not correct there, which paragraphs have to be reworked upon. So look at those points and then attend to those things again. And if you have some of your close friends, if you have very near and dear friends whom you can trust upon, because at times people do not want to share their own work with anybody. But if there are certain people around you, maybe your some family members, your cousins and relatives, share with them. Few chapters, give to them and ask them to read and then give their feedback, correct feedback, analytical feedback to you, so that whatever feedback they give to you, you can revisit your work and make further improvement. Now I come to the second portion of my presentation, in which I'm going to talk about ethics. Now, what are ethics? Ethics are norms of conduct that distinguish between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. These are the principles and guidelines that help us to uphold things we value. We always hear in society these are certain things which are not ethical, and this is ethical. So, which is acceptable by society and which is not? Uh, these are those principles and guidelines. And research plays a very important role, ethics plays a very important role in our research. Number one point we have to keep in mind is that our research should not cause any harm uh, to any participant. As a sign of respect for other researchers and cause no harm to the participant. It is a professional requirement. It is the requirement to obtain funding. If you are from a technological background, if you're from sciences, engineering, even social sciences also. We make our research proposal, we submit it to the funding agency. And then we are very optimistic that we would be funded and we would get certain funds to carry on with our research. If you are in that process of getting funds, making a proposal, do it, very nice, follow it up, but whatever you are doing, it should not cause any harm to anybody around you, any person who is in touch with you, or any participant. So whatever you are working upon, it has to be in ethical frame of mind. So there are certain basic principles which are related with research ethics. One has to be honest. You have to be very objective in carrying out your research. You have to have integrity, carefulness, openness, respect for intellectual property. Your idea should be your own. It should not be taken up from somebody else's idea. So respect your own intellectual right, also your own property, and respect the ideas which others have. Do not pick up others' idea and make it a part of your own research. Be very confidential in whatever research you are doing it, and let others also have their own privacy. So you need to have respect for your colleagues. Do not be jealous, though there are instances of professional jealousies happening, but you have a bigger role to play. You have social responsibility. So do not discriminate. Do not be jealous of your colleagues. So important areas in research ethics: authorship. Authorship refers to if you have come across or you have written a paper, who are the authors? How many? Is it a single author, a sole author? Or there are two authors who have contributed in writing the research paper and later on getting it published in either UGC Care, Scopus Index, or Web of Science, or at other place also. So that authorship has to be kept in mind, and there has to be equal participation from all the authors involved. Plagiarism, very important, because now UGC has come out with its own paper, which is a part of coursework which the PhD scholars would undertake when they are doing their coursework, and this is referred as research and plagiarism ethics. So, and this is of, if you all must be aware of, this is of 2 credit paper, part of their coursework, wherein they would be told about the research integrity, the publication ethics, publication misconduct. They would also be introduced to citation, indexing, and the tools which are used to check plagiarism. We know that there are already two very important tools from where we can check the plagiarism, whether our papers are somebody has plagiarized, the project reports are plagiarized, or thesis is plagiarized or not. That can definitely be checked on through with the help of two software which are very prevalent now in India, is Turnitin and Orkun, which in fact Orkun UGC also recommends it. So plagiarism or copying, definitely without acknowledging, without making reference to the writer of that portion, definitely has to be avoided. Peer reviewed, when you submit a paper for publication, it goes for peer review. Now, peer review, the names to whom your paper is being sent to, that definitely has to be confidential. In fact, a person who is reviewing it should not be aware of the writer of the paper's name. So confidentiality is very important whenever a paper is peer reviewed. There are certain ethics which are involved if you are dealing with animals, with human subjects. That has to be carefully kept in mind. There are certain laws also associated with it. So one needs to be very particular about it. And research misconducts, one should not be involved in. So now I'll straight away come to two important points related with this slide. I would be talking about authorship, plagiarism, and peer review in little more detail. So authorship research, I told you it involves collaboration and assistance between experts and colleagues, wherein if you have more than one author dealing with a research paper, then definitely whoever is contributing to it, his or her name should be a part of that letter. It is reserved for persons who receive primary credit and hold primary responsibility for published work. It decides which colleagues should be listed as authors or co-authors. So before you begin collaborating with your friends, your colleagues, or people from different institutions, be very clear on this authorship and do not involve yourself in any misconduct or any differences later on. Just a minute. Okay, so next uh, we have authors, we have co-authors who have significantly contributed to research and writing. They have prepared and take the full responsibility for the content of the research article. They have contributed, they have revised their paper many times, and then they come out with the final version of the entire article. So this is the responsibility of author and co-author. So they are totally involved and they take the full responsibility of coming out with their research paper and for sending it for publication in some journal. I come back to plagiarism once again, and plagiarism is presenting the words, phrases, ideas, or work of another, including certain facts and statistics. That means including referring to others' work without acknowledging, without giving them the due credit for their original work. It will question the integrity, ethics, and trustworthiness of the researcher. It's a normal practice now, and at times we find that when research papers are sent for publication, are submitted to various journals, these are peer reviewed, and after the paper is reviewed, we get the comments of the editors and the people who have reviewed that so and so much portion of your paper and that much percentage of the paper is plagiarized, please explain. And certain journals even go to the extent of writing it back to the institution wherein that researcher is working to blacklist that researcher, and the journal also blacklists that researcher. So You have to be very much sure of not getting yourself involved into any kind of plagiarism. Be very much sure of what you are writing. There are various tools wherein you can check and recheck your paper, and do not intentionally or unintentionally be involved into any plagiarized material. The PhD thesis which are submitted by a research scholar, they normally accept plagiarism up to 9%. In whole of the thesis, only 9% of plagiarism material is accepted, and that also plagiarism would be your reference to certain text and certain secondary material which you mention within the quote marks. So that shows that when you are making your thesis, so academic world is totally not tolerating any kind of plagiarism. Be very much sure about it. Peer review. So before a paper is published in a journal, it is subjected to the process of peer review, and it is designed, it takes place to ensure that only high quality and reliable information is published. And there are various steps. An editor chooses 2 or 3 research experts in that particular topic, specific topic, and after taking consent from the expert, he would send the paper. Now, herein, as I mentioned, confidentiality has to be maintained. The names of the paper sender and the writer of the paper should be kept confidential from the research expert, because therein otherwise there would be certain subjectivity that would come into play, and the paper has to be reviewed fully objectively without taking into consideration, without giving any leverage to any of the researcher. So reviewers should not know the author they are reviewing. The author should not tell the names of the reviewer. No person involved in the process can publicly disclose the information in the article. So these are some of the ethical guidelines that that has to be kept in mind, either if you are writing your thesis, or if as a researcher you are writing your research paper and getting it published, because a research scholar also has a compulsion of bringing out 2 or 3 publications before actually submitting the thesis in the university or the institution. And also ethics have to be followed not only by scholars but for everybody who is in this profession. So the plagiarism has to be totally avoided. So with this, I come to an end of my presentation on what tips one needs to keep in mind to write your dissertation or your thesis, and what ethics one has to follow. Before I end, I would like to make mention of few books which one should read if you are dealing with research methodology. One book which I really liked is by Sage Publication, written by Ranjit Kumar. The title of the book is Research for Beginners, right? The title of the book is Research Methodology, and it is particularly written for the beginners who have just started taking baby steps in this. Another book is by R.B. Burns, which he wrote in 1994, and the name of the book is Introduction to Research Methods, and wherein he describes about the what research is, and he defines it in his own terms as a systematic investigation to find answers to a problem. So as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, whatever research or academic research you take up, you have to identify a gap. You have to identify a problem, a research problem, and then you have to systematically go in for investigation, go in for critical scrutiny. A book by C.R. Kothari, which he wrote in 1990, titled as Research Methodology, published in New Delhi, again is very important book that one can read and refer to. Um, Lastly, I would mention one book which came out in 1993 by R. Grinnell. The name of the book is Social Work, Research and Evaluation. It was printed by Peacock Publishers, and Grinnell also defines what is research. And he says that it is a structured inquiry that utilizes acceptable scientific methodology to solve problems and create new knowledge that is generally applicable. So, herein also, I end on that note that research is nothing but creating new knowledge and revisiting your research. So, this is my mail ID. You can always send me your feedbacks regarding the presentation or any other point that you want to share with me. Your comments, your suggestions, your feedback is always welcome. Thank you so much and have a great day. Be safe, stay at home.